Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Let me get right to it here. This might be a long one. I have a little bit of audio to play, a couple of headlines here to get to, geopolitically speaking, just a few things to iron out. Plenty of education topics to bring up as well, and a couple of jab-related things here at the end. There's a lot going on here, certainly worldwide and certainly where I live as well. And I'm a busy guy, and I like this, and I like helping people, and I plan on continuing to do so. So again, my apologies sometimes if some of these episodes are a little scatterbrained, or I don't know, may even get a little longer. And sometimes if they're short, the reason that they're short is because I have other things to do regarding, again, the school system where I live, and going after these people that, as I suppose you could expect, the time and the research that it takes to get to the bottom of what's going on, and then, of course, who to communicate with and how to file complaints and a number of other things is very time-consuming. So again, I appreciate everybody listening, and I appreciate the support. And again, I'll just start off by saying that, there's just a lot going on here. So the unfortunate part about that, of course, is that I'm only one person, so I'm going to miss a great deal. Because there does come a time in the day when I have to put this down and just kind of relax, or else I'll cook my brain and not even look at the sun, which, I'm inside more than I would like. But either way, enough of the complaining. Let me get down to business here and down to brass tacks. First of all, geopolitically speaking, regarding the death of the Pope, it was predicted, of course, years ago among numerous individuals, certainly online, that when certain elements are controlled, of course, globally, that will signify the control of those particular entities and give sovereignty back to the United States. The death of the Pope was predicted years ago, and that, of course, would signify the sovereignty of the money, so to speak, and the freedom of the gold that the Vatican had coming back to the United States. In my opinion, I'm not the only one that shares this, that's exactly what all of the Fort Knox talk has been about. That if there was gold in Fort Knox any number of years ago, that was shipped over to the Vatican to, of course, make the United States bankrupt, and more bankrupt than it already was. But if that money has, of course, been returned as a result of the Vatican, which again, it certainly was discussed on numerous shows that was in fact the case, 400 tons of gold or something along those lines, then clearly the death of the Pope would indicate that was the case. So I don't think that's a bad thing, but let me read this particular post here, because I think the next step, of course, is the elimination of the Federal Reserve. There was a post here on greatawakening.win, and it said the following. It said, top Trump econ advisor says White House is studying ways to fire Jerome Powell. Of course, the head of the Federal Reserve as of right now. It says President Trump's top economic advisor, told reporters Friday that the White House is exploring how to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell despite the legal guardrails on his position. Kevin Hassett, chair of the White House National Economic Council, backed away from his previous concerns about Powell's firing, and said the White House was looking for ways to replace the Fed chief. Quote, the president and his team will continue to study if Powell can be fired, Hassett told reporters at the White House. Hassett served as the chair of the White House Council on Economic Advisors during Trump's first term, during which the president frequently criticized and threatened to fire Powell. It says Trump's anger with Powell reignited after this week, after months of the president becoming increasingly critical of the Fed chief. He blasted Powell last Thursday morning, on social media, of course, for refusing to cut interest rates, saying that he couldn't wait for the Fed chair's termination. His criticism came a day after Powell warned that Trump's tariffs could cause economic growth to stall while inflation increases. It says a dynamic known as stagflation. I hate that term. It goes on, it says, which would likely keep the Fed from being able to cut rates. The president escalated his attacks Thursday afternoon, insisting Powell would leave if he attempted to fire him. It says a 90-year-old Supreme Court precedent likely protects Powell from being fired by the president for anything other than misconduct or severe neglect of office. And Powell has repeatedly insisted he cannot legally be fired and would refuse to leave until the end of his term. It says during Trump's first term, Hassett declared Powell 100% safe, even as the president raged against the Fed chief, a lifelong Republican whom Trump himself appointed to the job for refusing to cut interest rates. Hassett recounted in his 2021 memoir, that he and other Trump advisors warned the president that firing Powell might not actually be possible and would likely crash financial markets regardless of its legality. It says when pressed on that opinion Friday, Hassett said the market was in a completely different place, quote unquote, at the time, and his comments were limited to the first Trump White House's legal analysis. Hassett also took shots at Powell's leadership of the Fed and the bank generally, accusing them of orchestrating an interest rate increase as soon as Trump took office. Quote, I'd like to think of the policy rather than the personality. And the policy of this Federal Reserve was to raise rates the minute that President Trump took office last time, Hassett said. It goes on, it says the Fed hiked interest rates in December of 2016 under former Fed Chair Janet Yellen, 1 month before Trump took office, and a year after its most recent interest rate hike. It says at the time, Powell was a member of the Fed's Board of Governors. It says the Fed hiked rates 3 more times under Yellen as it braced for inflation that never materialized. Powell was confirmed as the Fed chair in February of 2018 and presided over 4 rate hikes, 3 of which were reversed the following year. Hassett also claimed Powell has expressed inconsistent alarm about federal spending and debt under Trump and former President Biden. Quote, having everybody that refused to warn about the runaway spending out there saying, oh, this is going to be a catastrophe for inflation because of the tariffs, means that people need to improve their models and improve their messaging, Hassett said. It wraps up and says Powell, however, was warned under both Trump and Biden that the U.S. was on an unsustainable fiscal path and needed to pay down its debt, unquote. Again, that was from The Hill, that entire article there that I just read. The Federal Reserve is the thing that has to cease to exist. It can be run out of the Treasury. And if more things are moved into the Treasury, then the Fed becoming obsolete is clearly the next move. The death of the Pope, I think, signifies that move. I think that's an inevitability that will likely occur. And there you go. Again, I'm not the only one that has that take. There are a lot of people theorizing about that, but that was just one of the things I wanted to mention there. Here's another one. It has to do with a Q post and Q posts. And one of the ways, again, that they communicate with us sometimes are just through timestamps and the length of a video. So Donald Trump on his Truth page posted this particular video again where he was in the Oval Office just the other day. I guess it would have been Wednesday. And he was meeting with wounded veterans. And the video was 31 seconds long and he posted it twice. So if you go to the Q boards, for example, and you look up post number 31, here's what it says. Keeping in mind, of course, everything that's happening geopolitically speaking, all of the so-called wars that are allegedly about to take place, or, all of this sort of stalemate back and forth stuff. Not to mention, of course, it's worth mentioning this just sort of as a sidebar that Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois is no longer going to run for office in 2026. So he's resigning, which means someone got to him. Either a deal was made for him to cooperate, but either way, he's out of the picture. So they might have another radical, perfectly in place, like a Rahm Emanuel or God knows who else. But either way, Dick Durbin is gone, which is good. But here's what Post 31 says, again, based on a 31-second video that, again, Trump put out there. This was from November 1st of 2017. Again, it was the 31st Q post that was ever out there. It says, world stalemate. It says, we have the goods on everyone else. That's part of the reason why some things that tie back to foreign heads of state will remain classified. And then in parentheses, it says, not all. It says, we are in one of the most critical times of our country. Trump and others are working to balance we are doing well for America for the common person to endorse while at the same time purify our government and remove the bad actors who are entrenched. There is so much string pulling and blackmail that we need to cut these off to truly gain the power granted to us by the patriots and hardworking people of this great country, unquote. Again, that's all that it says, but that says a lot. And you've heard me bring that up before, that these people are blackmailed, a great deal of them. And if you eliminate the blackmailers, well, then the blackmailed can't be blackmailed anymore, which means they're basically free. They're completely detached. I think Marco Rubio, again, as I've said before, is one of those people. You don't do a complete 180-degree shift from being a warmonger to not being a warmonger. And then, of course, being distanced from Trump as a senator and a blackmailed senator, as opposed to Trump recruiting him and then bringing him in and bringing him closer to Trump, rather. So, again, there's so many moving parts here, it's almost impossible to keep track, but that's just one other move that is constantly occurring. And again, like I said, the resignation and the public acknowledgement that Dick Durbin isn't going to run again is a big, big deal. There was also this, again, from the Gateway Pundit for what it's worth, but Attorney General Pamela Bondi officially launches Eradicating Anti-Christian Bias Task Force ordered by President Trump. Again, this was through an executive order. This is a good thing. RFK sits on this particular board, so does Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and many others. This is a good thing. This clearly, of course, has been happening in schools. It's been happening in the medical profession, certainly throughout hospitals during the whole COVID lie. It's been happening regarding everything. And again, certainly at the university and K-12 school level, I think, that goes without saying. But they can't create a commission, that they call their anti-Semitism commission, quote unquote, without, of course, addressing other individuals and other races of individuals who make up another, a particular religion, so to speak. So, it is what it is. I don't know what's going to come from it, but it's a good look. I mean, it looks good, certainly at face value, because it's a different counter. Like I said, what comes from it, I think might be anybody's guess. But they certainly have to have something like this, because if they don't, it makes it look like that they're just, supporting one group over another, or one race over another, and that, of course, is a very bad look. So, that can't happen. But either way, I think time will tell as to what exactly comes from all of that, and we'll have to see. There was also this, of course, regarding the World Economic Forum. They allegedly are investigating Klaus Schwab. I don't actually think that that's happening. I think that any investigation of Klaus Schwab by the very organization that he helped fund and run is absurd. Again, he's 88 years old, and he's a complete psycho. So, again, did somebody get to him? Has he been executed? I have no idea. But I do know that the guy who's apparently going to take over, and this was making the rounds the other day, is the former CEO of Nestle. And this guy's a psycho, because this guy, again, in past interviews, has openly said that water is not a human right, that no one has the human right to drink water, let alone clean water, and that he should control all of that and whatever else. Again, these people are demonic, and they, of course, are all blackmailed themselves, and they're a part of secret societies and everything else. So it's kind of a meet the new boss, same as the old boss kind of situation, I think. Again, until the entire World Economic Forum and its buildings and all of its people and the child trafficking that they've engaged in since their inception all ceases to exist and is completely blown to smithereens, they're just going to keep doing what they do. Again, much like the World Health Organization, same thing. Until they're completely eliminated, they're held accountable for crimes against humanity, their buildings are blown up and they're all eliminated, and the organization ceases to exist, and we can assume that they're not there to help anybody, they're just there to hurt and kill. So, yeah. Again, any investigation by the WEF against Klaus Schwab is an absolute joke. So I'm just going to leave that there with that. Let me see here. Okay. That's kind of where I'm going to stop it geopolitically. Again, a lot of good things happening. I'll mention it, of course, perhaps a little bit later regarding the jabs, but RFK, again, is doing what he can do, certainly regarding food dyes and the elimination of food dyes and other poisons that are in food. He's talking about taking the COVID shots off of the childhood schedule, which, of course, if children take it, they'll die. That should go without saying at this point. They should just be eliminated, period. Which, again, I think that's the long-term plan. I would hope, of course, that it would be done quicker, but the wheels of justice, so to speak, move very slowly, and this is an issue. So, again, time will tell with that, but one step at a time. And again, a lot of good things are happening, and this isn't one of those things, again, that I think can all be fixed just within 100 days or, I don't know, 3-4 months. There's too much that needs to go on here. Because like I've said, if they scream from the mountaintops who the real enemy is and what that enemy has planned for everybody and how everything that we've believed our entire life is a lie and the poisons we've consumed and everything else, if they told the truth about all of it right out of the gate, less people would believe them. That's exactly what the Q drops were all about. It was about a slow reveal of what's really gone on in the world regarding politicians, corporations, you name it, the education system, everything. And how that, of course, is the real sick underbelly of the world that we live in. So, again, kind of in conclusion here, I want to read this quick little post from Clandestine on X, because, again, there are a lot of very good things happening here, and there certainly have been this week. First of all, he said the following. He said, Trump is canceling World War III while trying to reset global trade and get rid of income tax. He then said RFK Jr. is taking chemicals out of our food and combating Big Pharma. Tulsi Gabbard is releasing files and catching leakers. Pete Hegseth is reinstating service members who refused COVID shots and removing wokeness from our military. Again, these are all good moves. Unfortunately, there are still bad things happening, even within some of these agencies, but there are good things happening too. It says Cash and Bondi are rounding up violent criminals, gang members, Tesla terrorists, and more. Elon is almost finished building Doge and is exposing hundreds of billions in government waste. The Trump administration officially declared COVID was a man-made pathogen that Fauci lied about. And that Fauci lied, rather. He said anyone saying that nothing is happening, quote unquote, could not be more wrong. Trump is implementing his agenda, keeping his promises, and it has only been 3 months. He then said just because certain things haven't happened yet doesn't mean that they are not being worked on. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Embrace the process, unquote. This is true. And that's undeniable. So here we go. Education-related things, and there are many. Let me do some geopolitical things first, and then I'll do some state of Ohio stuff next. Geopolitically, there were a number of executive orders that were signed the other day in the Oval Office, all having to do with education, or certainly the indoctrination system that currently exists. This is putting so much pressure, ladies and gentlemen, on these institutions of indoctrination that they are losing their minds. And like I said in the last episode, their default setting and their solution is to not figure out why they are wrong. As an education institution, it's to simply scream and shout back at state and federal politicians that you disagree with what they're doing. So here were some of the executive orders that were signed. He signed an executive order requiring full and timely disclosure by higher education institutions when they receive large foreign gifts. Kind of a big deal. He signed another executive order to overhaul the higher education accreditation system, ensuring colleges and universities deliver high-quality, high-value education free from unlawful discrimination and ideological overreach. This is going to take some time because you're talking about rebuilding the foundation of the entire system, which of course is the accreditation companies in the accreditation process. That's going to be some interesting work there. The next one he signed had to do with creating new educational and workforce development opportunities for American youth in artificial intelligence. Again, it's a bit vague, but it'll be interesting exactly to see how it transpires, what takes place with all of that. And again, hopefully it doesn't mean that they're going to be basically trained to lose their own jobs in the future from artificial intelligence. I certainly hope that's not the case. But again, if it makes people more efficient and businesses more efficient by asking numerous individuals through an algorithmic software how to be more successful, then I'm all for it. Again, if you run a school system, for example, through an artificial intelligence parameter, and you start asking it particular things about how to run its business, it will shit all over the education business first. Like I've said before, these AI systems will openly tell you that based on everything that's gone on, and again, all of the systems that they run these questions through and all of the articles that end up getting pumped back, it openly states that education is reactive, not proactive. Which means anytime you hear a school system say, well, we're being proactive about this. No, you're actually not. You're just lying. And you're doubling down on your lie, and that can be proven time and time again. Anyway, the executive orders go on, and another one was signed to establish a White House initiative on historically black colleges and universities to enhance the capacity of HBCUs to deliver high-quality education. Now, this is my personal opinion. I think HBCUs should be done away with, and I say that only because they discriminate against whites. The simple fact that there are only black colleges, so to speak, seems a bit absurd to me. If there were an only white college and they called it a historically white university, again, everybody would lose their minds and the amount of civil rights violations would be flying through the roof. So why not just stop calling them HBCUs and just do away with them, or just stop calling them HBCUs and just call them colleges? And if a person wants to attend and they want to waste their money and their time attending one, I mean, go for it, I guess. But, it just seems discriminatory either way. Another executive order was signed to modernize American workforce programs to prepare citizens for the high-paying, skilled trade jobs of the future. Good. Another one was signed, and this one had to do with eliminating the use of the woke so-called disparate impact liability to ensure equal treatment under the law. Again, it should go without saying, I've mentioned it a million times, all of the DEI nonsense and things of that nature, again, discriminating against certain students, certainly hiring practices and everything else, all violated the civil rights laws and the Civil Rights Act. It couldn't have been more blatant at the time, and it was beyond overwhelming how many people just fell for it and thought that it was just good, good school-related policy. I mean, it's completely absurd. But it wasn't just, of course, the education business that was doing that. It was numerous places of work, not hiring white people, wanting to hire, again, more people of color and blah, blah, blah. Absolutely nuts. And then the last one, I believe, was an executive order here on school discipline policies that revokes flawed Obama-Biden guidance that pressured schools to impose discipline based on racial equity and gives teachers the ability to ensure that they have order in their classrooms. This one is wide-ranging, and this one I want to dive into just a little bit more specifically on their website, which again is the whitehouse.gov website. And here's what it was titled. Again, this is a bit long, but it's worth reading. Reinstating common sense school discipline policies. It says, Section 1, Purpose and Policy. The federal government will no longer tolerate known risks to children's safety and well-being in the classroom that result from the application of school discipline based on discriminatory and unlawful equity ideology. So let me give you a local example before I continue reading this. In the last episode, when I was playing audio from the most recent school board meeting, Scotty King got up to the microphone and he called out the superintendent for being a liar, because he is, lies to the public, and then somebody will do a FOIA on an email or a certain set of criteria and words that are brought up in emails, and then before you know it, it's quickly found out that the superintendent was lying to everybody. The superintendent told the public in the school district in the town where I live that this designation of in-school assignment, or ISA, predated him showing up as superintendent, and that much like detention, so to speak, that ISA is a way to ensure that students remain in school and in the classroom or closer to the classroom so that they are not expelled or, again, outside of the building because of discipline reasons. That very designation is unlawful. That's number one. It's unlawful in the state of Ohio because it's not a designation that exists, and he doesn't have the freedom to manipulate the discipline system to benefit whomever. In this particular case, it was built to benefit the adopted son of a former board member, which is also unethical based on the Ethics Commission in the state of Ohio and would be unethical under most. Again, you're using your political position to benefit a family member, certainly as a school board member. But of course, you're doing it with the backing of the entire school board and the superintendent himself. This was not supposed to happen. This executive order would go after something very specific like that. So I would encourage any parents, again, looking at something like this, to use this against school boards because, yes, executive orders have to be followed. It's a direct order from the executive branch that this is what departments have to do, certainly the Department of Education, but also state departments have to follow this as well. That you have to get rid of all of your subcategories, categories, or other ways of, again, not disciplining minorities more specifically at the expense of the entire building and at the risk or safety of others that actually coexist inside of the building. The executive order goes on here. It says in January of 2014, the Department of Education and the Department of Justice jointly issued a Dear Colleague, quote-unquote, letter regarding school discipline. It says in that letter, the Department of Education and the Department of Justice explained that schools could be found to violate Title VI of the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and therefore could lose federal funding if their disciplinary decisions ran afoul of a newly imposed disparate impact framework under which race-neutral disciplinary policies applied in an even-handed manner may be improper if members of any racial groups are suspended, expelled, or referred to law enforcement at higher rates than others. The letter effectively required schools to discriminate on the basis of race by imposing discipline based on racial characteristics rather than on objective behavior alone. Translation: it was created to protect blacks at the expense of whites. That's it. That's exactly what it was designed to do. Don't suspend blacks, and if a white or a black do the exact same thing and violate the exact same policy, rule, law, etc., punish the white, not the black. Or, again, take it a step further, manipulate the paperwork and delete disciplinary records of blacks, but keep the ones that have to do with whites. This was done under Obama. So, the dots are on top of each other. They don't even need connecting. It says the consequences harmed students and schools. The 2008 report from the Federal Commission on School Safety noted evidence that because of the 2014 letter, schools ignored or covered up, rather than disciplined, student misconduct in order to avoid any purported racial disparity in discipline numbers that might catch the eye of the federal government. As a result, students who should have been suspended or expelled for dangerous behavior remained in the classroom, making all students less safe. It says, as the commission found, quote, when school leaders focus on aggregate school discipline numbers, rather than the specific circumstances and conduct that underlie each matter, schools become less safe, unquote. And, quote, research clearly indicates that the failure of schools to appropriately discipline disruptive students has consequences over overall student achievement. The commission's seemingly obvious conclusion was that disciplinary decisions are best left in the hands of classroom teachers and administrators and should be based on student behavior rather than racial statistics. It goes on here. It says, following the commission's report on December 18th of 2018, the 2014 Dear Colleague letter was rescinded. In 2023, however, the previous administration's Department of Education and Department of Justice issued new guidance noting the statistical racial disparities in student discipline may indicate violations of law and encouraging schools to collect, analyze, and adjust their disciplinary policies in light of racial disciplinary data. Well, I hate to break it to them, but black students break the law more than whites. This is a statistical fact. Doesn't matter the school district, doesn't matter what it is. This is a fact. It says the 2023 guidance thus effectively reinstated the practice of weaponizing Title VI to promote an approach to school discipline based on discriminatory equity ideology. As a consequence of these policies, teachers and students are suffering increased levels of classroom disorder and school violence. I would take it a step further, and I would say it's demoralizing and purposefully so. This was all done to demoralize the entire business more so than it's already been demoralized. Because there is nothing more demoralizing to students, parents, and even ethical teachers than when any student, regardless of race, comes back to school after being disciplined, and yet they've never actually been disciplined nor left school in the first place, nor been kicked out. The simple fact that it's more difficult today to expel someone than ever before should prove that. It goes on in Section 2, talks about definitions. It says the definitions of the executive order ending racial indoctrination in K-12 schooling shall apply to this order, along with behavior modification techniques, means any school discipline policies or practices that incorporate or are based on discriminatory equity ideology. And then in Section 3, ensuring common sense school discipline policies, it says within 30 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Education, in consultation with the Attorney General, shall issue new guidance to local educational agencies, the state educational agencies, regarding school discipline and their obligations not to engage in racial discrimination under Title VI in all contexts, including school discipline. I'm telling you what. This is amazing. You talk about squeezing the entire business. I mean, they've got these people by the balls, and they hate it. Because in every single school board meeting now, because they do their, of course, executive summary of all of the political things that are happening at the state and federal level, they're going to have to bring this up. And they're going to have a presentation based on this executive order. And I love it, because they're all going to panic. They're all going to panic. And the number of school districts that are going to dismiss this will be almost all of them, which means you'll have them right where you want them. So if parents are still sending their children to these buildings, you would do well to show up at a school board meeting and read this executive order to them verbatim and remind them of what they've done in the past, how that violated the Civil Rights Act, of course, numerous discriminatory laws, anti-discriminatory laws rather, and how you've basically got them right where you want them. It goes on, it says the Secretary of Education shall take appropriate action with respect to LEAs and SEAs that fail to comply with Title VI protections against racial discrimination in the application of school discipline. Within 60 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Education and the Attorney General shall initiate coordination with governors and state attorney generals regarding the prevention of racial discrimination in the application of school discipline. Again, this is open and closed. If student A is black and student B is white, and they get in a fight, and student B, the white one, is the one who's disciplined, and student A is not, it's a civil rights violation. Which means you have a lawsuit against the district, which means that's exactly what you should do. You should file a civil rights violation immediately. Same thing if it's the other way around. If the shoe's on the other foot, again, regardless of race, it's a civil rights violation. It says, within 90 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Defense shall issue a revised school discipline code that appropriately protects and enhances the education of the children of America's military service families. So even in military school, and again, those who are on bases receiving education, they too have to follow all of this. It goes on. It says, within 120 days of this date of this order, the Secretary of Education shall, in coordination with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Homeland Security, submit a report to the President through the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy regarding the status of discriminatory equity ideology, based school discipline, and behavior modification techniques in American public education. The report shall include inventory and analysis of the nature of the consequences in Title VI discipline-related investigations since 2009. That's not going to be good. I bet that stack of papers is a mile long. Let's see. An assessment of the role of nonprofit organizations that are federal grant recipients in promoting discriminatory equity ideology-based discipline and behavior modification techniques, and recommendations to ensure the federal taxpayer funds do not flow to programs or activities, including those nonprofit organizations that promote discriminatory equity ideology-based discipline and behavior modification techniques. This also means you can't use PBIS anymore. That's very specifically what this means, and that's going to fly over the heads of all of these school districts. They don't know that that's what this means, because PBIS and all of that fake money, monopoly money bullshit that they give every single student for absolutely nothing is based on discrimination. Now the chickens are coming home to roost on this, and I fucking love it. I love it. See, they're not going to see that in this executive order. They're going to say behavior modification. Well, we can't do this or we can't do that, but whatever. No, you can't do any of it anymore. That means restorative practices is gone. It's gone. This executive order eliminates restorative practices too. Means no one can use that communistic language anymore. You can't create excuses. It's a way to keep them in the classroom so that they're successful and all this other horse shit. No. It's gone now. And the clock is ticking. You have 120 days. Again, the federal DOE has 120 days to solidify this, or else they're going to start getting reports. Again, mark my words, I'm going to file complaints against the local school district on all of this if they do not comply. I want this school district where I live, I want their federal money in the palm of my hand. Period. That's right where I want it. If they don't eliminate restorative practices, if they don't eliminate PBIS, then they're finished, because it's right here crystal clear in this executive order. That's again what all of this behavior modification, quote unquote, nonsense specifically means. It goes on, it says also as a part of this, an assessment of discipline-related policies and curricular options that do not promote discriminatory equity ideology, and model school discipline policies that promote common sense, protect the safety and educational environment of students, do not promote unlawful discrimination, and are rooted in American values and traditional virtues. This is sorry. It's not. I don't think of any of that when I think of the American schooling system. Does anybody else? Does anybody else think of American traditional values, common sense, morals, ethics, etc., etc.? Again, this is exactly why they would hate this executive order. This is a kick right between the legs, and there isn't anything they can do about it. And again, the executive order basically ends there, and then it just goes through the general provisions of, again, this applies to everybody, and it's not intended to benefit certain individuals at the expense of others, and so on and so on. So, again, the American schooling system can disagree with this all they want, but this is this is an absolute kick in the teeth. There's no way around it. Again, one of the places where they're going to dig in like ticks, and of course it still exists, unfortunately, is that when the executive orders were signed regarding DEI, and even again the particular memo went out there regarding, I guess this would have been back in February if memory serves, regarding again the Secretary of the Department of Education, and at the time it was right before Linda McMahon was confirmed. But that memo went out, and I covered that memo and read the whole memo on the show. That meant that they had to get rid of all of their gay books out of the libraries. All of their pornographic books and all of that cartoon bullshit, all of that had to be eliminated. But most of them didn't even know that. Those books were adopted under the whole DEI umbrella. But again, how many of these libraries and schools still have those books? Again, this is you can stay in the corrupt business, I suppose, and I understand again why people do, and they do it for a variety of reasons. Some of it's lost on me. I understand the business of brainwashing very well, but if you're going to stay in the business, then understand these executive orders and understand what the schools are supposed to comply with, and then compare the two. If the executive order lines up with the thing that the school is still doing that they're not allowed to do anymore, like again, all the pornographic cartoon books that exist telling, boys to have sex with each other as often as humanly possible and what that looks like and how that's done. If those books still exist in the libraries, then they're violating an executive order, which means you need to, again, bring these revelations to them, either in a school board meeting or in, again, an email, which, of course, you're not going to receive a response back. But there's a number of different things that people can do. The next thing, of course, has to do with this most recent executive order and discipline. This has to be held over their heads. There's nothing better and nothing more damning, again, than school board members violating federal law and federal executive orders. So I love it. It's got to keep happening. Again, they're going to dig in like ticks. I mean, hell, right now, the Supreme Court is actually hearing a case from the Maryland State School District, or certainly a school district in the state of Maryland, having to do with their use of these pride gay books. One of them is called Pride Puppy. And the members of the Supreme Court read this particular book, again, at the federal level. And you had, flamboyant gay lawyers on behalf of the Maryland school districts, again, defending their use of these kinds of books to the Supreme Court and saying that they're allowed to use them. And then going through it with a fine-tooth comb and saying, well, the reason that this one girl is dressed up in leather, it's not bondage that she's wearing. It's just a leather jacket. It's like, come on. We're splitting hairs here. It's a fag book for fags. And it's designed, again, it's specifically designed to get kids to be indoctrinated with that satanic ideology. It's that simple. But the Supreme Court is taking up these cases, for God's sakes. This right here should tell people how far the entire business has fallen. It's unrecognizable. This would have never been allowed among any generation prior to the last two, under any circumstance. Any school teacher, administrator bringing this in, anything like this, would have again immediately been fired. And this is one of those books too, where at the end of the book, apparently it has a search and find word list. Again, find the hot dog, find the hamburger, find a person wearing a rainbow headband, find a leather jacket, find the drag queen quilt. I mean, it's stupid. Find a zipper. It says that. Find the hot dog, find the zipper. Come on. We know who wrote these books. We know why they wrote them. We know exactly what this is all about. But based on the executive order now, school districts who have this are violating the executive order. School districts that discriminate against anybody at the expense of others, specifically, again, whether it be race or sex or whatever, and make excuses as to why they're doing that, they too are violating the executive order. It's time to catch these people, and it's time to do the legwork on this to make sure that these individuals have nowhere to go and that they lose federal funding. Watch them reverse course in the blink of an eye. I'm telling you, they're going to dig in like ticks. Now, speaking of stupidity and digging in like ticks, I want to play this. This is a 15-minute exchange on Fox News between Martha McCallum and the head of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten. Now, as you're well versed in already, this woman is a complete fool. And she lies, and she's remarkably unknowledgeable, and she uses all of the buzz phrases and buzz sentences that exist that only a gullible person would actually believe when it comes to the corrupt business of education, because let's face it, she's one of these mob bosses that again steals from individuals and claims that if you just throw more money at education, then somehow things will improve, when clearly that's not the case. It's a remarkably insulting back and forth between the two, but I want you to hear this because I want you to hear the exchange between these two individuals. So this is about 15 minutes long. Get comfortable, and I'll come back on the other end of this and be brief with my summary and then move on again to some other Ohio-related, school-related things that are taking place, because I think that this audio is a nice introduction to what you're going to hear next. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
So joining me now, glad to have with us today, Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Randy, nice to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining me. I know that you don't want to address this case specifically because you don't have teachers who are involved in it, but just in a broader sense in terms of this issue of these books and their impact across the board, you have really talked about protecting books of all kinds in Florida and other places across the board. So do you think twice when you listen to some of these examples of what's being read to 4 to 6-year-olds?
Mm-hmm. So, Martha, first off, thank you for having me on, and I hope that we get to all the other issues in terms of education. But I would say that this is a hard case, because parents, of course, have rights in terms of educating their kids, and schools have to be communities. And the moment you have a case like this with such great distrust for what is being taught in a classroom or read in a classroom, I consider that a failure from the beginning. And I say this as someone who is a gay person who understands that we have to actually make sure that families are respected and families are safe and kids are safe, and that differences are acknowledged and differences are embraced. But, once you get a case like this, where, parents are uncomfortable about what is being read to their kids in a classroom, this is something that has to be dealt with in a local level, not in the Supreme Court. And so parents have rights, and they should have rights in terms of what is being taught in classrooms. And, and we're going to have to actually deal with how we ensure that kids have a safe and welcoming environment, and that we see differences and we accept differences, whether those differences are religious or whether those differences are sexual, and that we actually make sure that the community is there as a community. So
do you believe, though, that there's an appropriate age to have a discussion? These are 4 to 6-year-olds, and they're being read, and this is out loud in the classroom, not just, this is a book on the shelf in the library. If there's a particular child that, you might want to read this with, but, just as an example, my pronouns are like the weather. They change depending on how I feel, and that's okay because they're my words. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of, just as one example here.
Let me put it this way, Martha, and I think that this will be shocking to you. These would not be the books I would be reading as a classroom teacher to kids who are 4 to 6 years old. Yeah. And I say this, I went through the New York City public school system. I was a teacher during when we had the big issue around Heather Has Two Mommies. And I think when you don't actually make sure that things are age appropriate, and we don't actually have sufficient conversations with teachers and parents in terms of how we accept differences, then you have situations like this right now. Yeah. And so my concern about this case is that it is, that it could pit people against each other, when what we really need to be doing is we need to be making sure that every one of God's children is accepted in our classrooms. And whether that person is an evangelical Christian, or whether that person is the daughter or the son of, gay parents, that is our obligation in schools. So, it's a failure of all of us that this case is in the Supreme Court right now.
So, it seems to me that the failure for all of us is what has happened to our kids in terms of their education. And I think what disturbs a lot of parents, religious background or non-religious background, is that they see this, woke ideology as, sort of the common phrase around all of this happening. And they're looking at the numbers and saying, why are you reading this book to my child when, first of all, I want to deal with this kind of discussion at home based on my own understanding of where my child might be. And B, the numbers are plummeting. Look at this. I mean, if this isn't a failure that needs to be so much more important than whether or not you're reading a book about your pronouns. This is the Maryland rankings. Fourth graders, these same little kids who've had these books, fed to them at a very young age, their reading ranked in 2013, they were second in the nation in Maryland. 2024, 20th. Math, 16th in the nation, plummeting down to 39th. So if I were a parent in this district, I would be saying, please, leave these books out of the picture. Teach my child to read and to do math, okay?
So, yes,
and let's focus on why we're there.
Can we focus on that? Which is let's focus on the kind of things that we should be doing for kids. Because if you so this is not a district that I represent. It's represented ably by the NEA, and they've done a terrific job. But let's talk about the NAEP scores for a minute, not the Maryland Lake scores. Why don't you put up the
you have, I think, about 18,000 teachers in the Maryland district at large. So.
No. But these are, so let's talk about the NAEP scores, for example, in Florida, which is a lot of people look at Florida and say, that is the king, that is the mother of all mothers of school choice. Their NAEP scores are the lowest. They really plummeted in the same way. Let's look at the NAEP scores in Massachusetts, which some people would say, probably on your, in your on your network, that those, that the Massachusetts scores or the Massachusetts schools are very much embedded in equality and diversity. So let's look at what happens in Massachusetts that really works and what happens in Florida that doesn't work. What happens in Massachusetts that works is that there is far more funding and there is a real culture of a safe and welcoming school. Well, and what we need to do is we need to actually do more of that.
So you're saying that because if we can find other areas around the country where the proficiency levels are also abysmal and should be embarrassing any education organization, that we can start to make assessments and say that, it's because of choice or it's because of money. We know that money does not equate a better outcome, because in Newark, New Jersey, you have a per student, per capita expenditure that is one of the highest in the country. And you have very difficult.
Martha, sweetheart, listen to me.
Please don't call me sweetheart.
It actually does. I'm sorry. My bad. It actually does matter. And in fact, some of the conservative folks who used to say that money doesn't matter actually have changed their mind. So the issue.
They wanted to go to different programs and choice programs and be able to give it to parents who want to homeschool their kids and provide.
No. I'm talking about people who are actually been looking at these numbers, and what I'm saying to you is this: things like Title I, which Mississippi used to hugely increase its literacy rates, that money really does matter, and conservatives, liberals all believe that we should actually have Title I in schools, and the disproportionate amount of money goes to red districts. Like 20% of Mississippi education funding.
One of the things that they've done in Mississippi is to expand choice, they're also doing something really important in Mississippi, which is to expand teacher training, because they realize that the teachers themselves do not necessarily understand the things that they're supposed to be teaching, which is a massive problem across the country. So I do give them credit for that. However, we must be clear-eyed about the fact that our students over the past 20 years have had very difficult, very weakened outcome. And we see it at the college level. We see it when kids are being pushed through these systems. I was talking to a teacher the other day. She said, I can't hold a kid back who can't read in third grade. I am forced to push him through the system.
So Martha, I agree with that teacher, and it's a problem. I mean, if you think about what has happened over the course of the last 50 years, the first 20 or 30 years of federal intervention in education was about the money and was about really focused on opportunity. The Johnson years, even the Nixon years, those things were actually, and you saw scores rise. Frankly, you saw scores starting to level off when it became about test scores as opposed to about kids' needs and the opportunities. And so what we want to do is we want to do more of what Mississippi just did. The teacher training there was terrific. And frankly, we're using some of the teacher training there. It's called Reading Universe. It's some of the science of reading programs that we and my union support. So
let me ask you this. I think that's very interesting because...
Wait.
Go ahead.
Let me just finish. The things that we spend 90% of our time on, I spend 90% of my time on issues like numeracy and literacy and critical thinking and problem solving and what we need to do to help every single child succeed. And ultimately, that's what we should be doing in public schools. And what the federal role is, it's actually to fill opportunity gaps. So you heard me at the beginning of your show on talking about this. I think parents need to have rights. I think it was a failure of what happened in Maryland.
One of the problems is it's such a distraction from what we should be focusing on in school. I mean, I know that you ran conferences where there were classes on using teachable moments to create welcoming classrooms around LGBT issues, how to deal with this issue inside and outside of the classroom. And I don't want to go back down that rabbit hole, but I do want to ask you one question before I let you.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because if you have a kid in your class who's gay,
right,
you have to figure out a way to create a welcoming and safe environment. But if you also have, if you looked at that same conference, we had tons of time on artificial intelligence, on career tech ed. So what teachers have to do is we have to embrace everything that society throws at us. We have to deal with.
Here's what I would say. I would say this: if you have a child in the classroom who's gay, you have a child in a classroom who maybe doesn't speak the language very clearly, you have all kinds of struggles that have honestly existed since the beginning of time.
Right.
I think you want to have a principal in a classroom that says we always respect each other. We don't call each other names. We respect each other. And then beyond that, those are behavior issues, right? And you have to deal with behavior issues, but you don't want to indoctrinate children. You don't want a child to hear a book read to the whole classroom and go home and say, why am I being taught that I was born a girl, but that was just a guess? I mean, that is going to freak out some children. They're going to be very confused at 4, 5, and 6 years old. And I know you said that you don't agree with reading this in the classroom, but I'm saying this is the problem. Then that same kid can't read and is pushed all the way to 8th grade and they still can't read.
So Martha, I suspect that you and I agree on more that we don't. I know you don't believe me.
No, I didn't say that.
What I'm saying to you is that I saw that case, and if you have not socialized books with parents, and a book that may be controversial, and you haven't actually talked to your parents of your kids in that classroom, that's going to be a problem regardless of what's in the book. And look, that was a problem. Think about Catcher in the Rye. Think about To Kill a Mockingbird. Think about other books that at different eras that's a problem. You have to actually spend time as a school teacher or a school principal with parents before you end up talking about issues that some people will think is controversial. And so but what I am saying to you is that 90% of teachers' times in classrooms are not about that. 90% of teachers' times in classrooms are about how we engage kids to actually be their full selves. How we make sure that kids actually
I'm honestly less concerned with them being their full self than I am with them being able to read and write and do math. And that is the biggest problem that we face in our schools today. And if I talk to one more teacher who tells me that they are not allowed to hold a child back who cannot read until he gets to the level where he can read. So let's just, I
agree with you.
I'll worry at home about whether or not, my child's whole self. But what I really need is for the school to teach them to read and write and do math and not get into all of this other stuff. So, Randy, I appreciate you coming. I always enjoy our conversations, and I think it's a really important dialogue, and I appreciate you coming here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy Weingarten.
Okay, I'll be brief. First of all, anybody who ever says that we agree more than we disagree, that person is lying to your face. That's usually number one. Number two, when she said it toward the beginning that schools have to be communities. No, they don't. That's not their job. This is part of the indoctrination that has existed in the business for a very long time, that we're all in this together, it takes a village, and blah, 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 blah. That's not true. It's supposed to be a very direct, objective environment that is supposed to teach the facts. That's really the biggest problem, is that they don't even teach the facts. The lies in the curriculum are endless. They're endless. You can pick a subject. They even, again, attempted to perverse math over the last 2 decades with new math, quote unquote, and whatever the hell that other name was, core curriculum, quote unquote. And all of this other nonsense. Again, it's all communistic. It's all designed to confuse. It's all designed to delay development. And it's all designed, again, to retard everybody in the environment, including the instructor themselves. But if the instructor doesn't know, again, that they're being socially engineered and socially manipulated to retard not only their students, but themselves as an instructor, then you've got them right where you want them. Again, it goes on with the whole Title I, entire debate. And it's not a debate. They always roll out this entire dump truck of handicapped students, money, teacher training, and gay books. And they all beat those drums as much as humanly possible. Then, of course, bringing in that entire phrase of, we have to teach students to be their whole selves and allow them to be their whole selves. No. Absolutely not. Students believe that superheroes and Santa Claus are real. Children believe that the tooth fairy is a real thing, and if they want to dress up like a cat, then they should be allowed to dress up like a cat. And if that goes on in the home, then it should be allowed to happen inside of a school building. No. Nope. That's not the way that it works. And again, to translate her, certainly Randy and some of the things that she was bringing up, she was essentially saying that you need to accept gay books and accept them, or else. That means that you as a parent not teaching your children about gays, then essentially you're a bad parent. And if you're not teaching students in school buildings about gay books and teaching students about all kinds of students, quote unquote, then there's something wrong with you as an educator. That's also wrong. And that's also, again, 100% false. And no, you cannot throw money at this problem. The money is being thrown at the problem because the money is purposely being thrown at them because it's being laundered. So money launderers want money to keep flowing. They're never going to say we need less money or we can manage without it. They'll never say that. They need to launder it. They're so brainwashed also that they believe that the things that they're spending the money on are working. It isn't. There's no correlation. None. And again, anytime somebody says as a school district that they're going to lose money, I have serious questions because I wonder where the money is going in the first place. Not to mention when they get donations, as many school districts do, I wonder where that money goes specifically. It usually goes again to community nonsense. It has nothing to do with actual school buildings receiving any kind of real technology that will benefit them as a whole. Again, it usually goes into salaries or a pay increase for somebody. This isn't where it's supposed to go. Let me give you an example. This now has to do with Westerville City Schools in Central Ohio, which is becoming my litmus test for what's about to happen other places because geographically they're closer to Columbus, Ohio. And as a result of that, they're looking at state measures that they have to implement as a result of state government faster than some other school districts might. So first of all, one of the things that Westerville is having to do here and is doing, and I've brought up LifeWise before and the Christian Right to Religious Instruction program, LifeWise. Every single time they have a school board meeting, and they had one earlier this week, which I didn't comment on Wednesday's episode, but the LifeWise people keep showing up to their school board meetings. And they're doing it on purpose to pressure the school district to accept LifeWise again. But they keep showing up. And they're really not speaking, they're just showing up with their presence, and they're all wearing their red t-shirts. I think this is a good move. I would like them to speak up a little bit more at the microphone, but they're not doing that. Again, the school district is running out the clock on LifeWise as far as the end of the year is concerned. I don't know why they think that that's a good idea. It's not. They're just running out the clock so that they don't have to implement any of this school year. It's a bad look for the school district. It makes them look like assholes because they are. But at the exact same time, by Ohio law, they have to allow LifeWise to exist within their school district again. So they have to do all of this and make a move on this by the summertime. So that's kind of number one. Number two, there is a cap in the state of Ohio on the cash that can roll over into the next year, as if to say, if you don't spend it, then you'll lose it. More specifically, they would have to give it back to the state of Ohio. Now, school districts don't like this because if they don't have something to spend the money on, then of course they lose it. Westerville claims that they could potentially lose $110 million in a rollover cap from the state of Ohio. So they would have to give that money back. Me personally, I love it. School districts losing money that they cannot unlawfully spend, or I would say unethically spend, on God knows what. Them having to give that back instead of it rolling over into money that they would get in the future or money that they could keep. Me personally, I love it. I want them to lose money. I want them to tighten their own books, get rid of administrators, get rid of unnecessary instructors, get rid of, again, front office personnel. Hell, they had to fire 50 people in the last board meeting. And sometimes they have these board meetings back to back. I mean, they'll have 2 board meetings in a month, Westerville City Schools. That's a lot of board meetings. But again, they had to fire 50 people in the last one. They openly admitted in this most recent board meeting, which happened again at the beginning of this week, which, again, I didn't cover in Wednesday's episode. They openly said that the money situation is so bad in Ohio schools, specifically regarding this cap on cash, that if this is the case and this goes through in the new budget, which I believe is set to be voted on in June, the treasurer claimed that by November, this coming November, she claimed that, again, it could have been a scare tactic, and it probably was, but she claimed that every single school district in Ohio would have to have a levy on the ballot this coming November. That's how bad the Ohio finances are for public schools. I love it. And good luck passing a levy. It won't happen. And just a little tip to the people in Westerville. If they reinstitute LifeWise, don't all of a sudden trust them with their finances and think that voting for a levy is somehow going to benefit you just because they gave you a little piece of the pie back. That's not how it works. With school districts, you twist the knife so the wound doesn't close. That's exactly what has to happen here. You make them feel pain. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is through their pocketbook. There isn't a single person on earth who should ever vote for a school levy in the future ever again. You're going to be the one feeling that financial pain. And the longer this goes on, the worse these levies are going to get in their detail. They're going to make the cost higher to the taxpayer. So just keep voting no. And make the school district get rid of all of the riffraff, because they'll have no choice. Yes, they'll weaponize the school district against you the same way that they have in the past, because that's what they always do. Well, we had to take away football. See what you made us do? We had to take away girls' basketball. See what you made us do? If you just voted for the levy, then we wouldn't have had to do any of this. No. They can balance their books if they knew what they were doing financially speaking. But they love divide and conquer among the public as much as humanly possible. They love weaponizing their own finances against the public and making them attempt to feel some kind of financial pain. Or we took away a precious club of yours, so you were forced to make us do this. That's not it. It has nothing to do with that. They have nothing but retaliatory approaches that they can use, is my ultimate point. Because that's all that they do all of the time. You don't give us a levy, we'll take away your busing. We'll show you. You don't give us a levy, we'll take away your precious sports ball. We'll show you. And that's all that they do. But what they hardly ever tell the public, even though they tell them, are the donations that they receive. But the worse the school district and the worse the people are who are running the school district, the less donations they'll receive sometimes. Take Westerville, for example. It's poorly run. The school board has no idea what they're doing. I mean, they're not bright people. But Westerville has also proven that they're one of these school districts that actually doesn't even need a school board. If you just let the school buildings themselves and the teachers run themselves, they can run independently of one another. I mean, wrap your head around this for a minute. What if American schools didn't have school boards anymore? And the schools themselves had a financial advisor who, again, took in money from the state and gave it to the school. Now, I understand, again, that all of this gets divided among the different schools. I mean, I understand how a school district operates. I'm simply saying that what if you took out the middleman and these individual schools were just so objective that they had a library, instructors, and then somebody who made sure that everybody was following the law. And then somebody who, again, divvied out the paychecks to the people who get paid, and that was it. It could be that simple, but it will never be. At least not in current times, because they are determined to complicate everything. And getting people again to shout at state politicians about changing something. Westerville specifically also received a $109,000 donation. And as a result of this particular year, they have over whatever it is, $360 some odd thousand at their disposal now. Again, I'm curious as to who gave them a recent $109,000 donation and where that money actually goes. So I'm going to end it there regarding education for this episode. But my overall point with all of this is that the business isn't learning. They're doubling down on stupidity. They're doubling down on their ideology. They're fighting back legally to continue to promote all of the perversions and illegality and unethical behavior that they've been doing for decades now. Executive orders are being written to rescind all of these perversions and all of this illegality and civil rights violation. And at the same time, these parents are caught in the middle, and concerned parents are caught in the middle wondering what to do. My suggestion, per usual, is to leave the system permanently. These individuals have to go through a bit of a detoxing also. as a result of these, all of this indoctrination that they've received over time. You have to have your children take at least an entire month off. Tell them to exercise, tell them to eat right, get outside. Use the summertime and the springtime in particular as an opportunity to do that. There's no better time from a health standpoint to leave the system permanently and forever right here, right now. And then teach your children that when they have children, to never send them to the public school system ever again. This has to be a generational collapse. It has to be. You bring down the system from a generational standpoint by teaching your children who attended to never attend. Because those that already have never attended and have young children who are already not attending, those children, when they have children, they won't send them to the public school system because they're already being raised that this is not a healthy environment for anybody. And it's not an objective, factual environment when it comes to content either. So that's how you take this down. You take it down playing the long game, but you also have to understand your rights always in the short game and defend yourself and go after these school districts, legally speaking. Civil rights violation complaints, FERPA violation complaints, Ethics Commission complaints, State Department of Education complaints. This is how this gets done. Now let me shift gears slightly here. And this is kind of a quick little story that I just want to mention and to remind people that I'm not, a cold-hearted bastard by any stretch. As cold as I can be, I do have a heart. In that same Westerville board meeting, there's a board member who has been coughing profusely since taking the COVID shots. I have no verification she's taken them, but she wears a mask. She's on the left. She coughs profusely. The dots are on top of each other. Her name is Jennifer Altman. She was on the board when the mask wearing was implemented in 2020, 2021, and again, not that long ago, a year or so ago, she was voted back in for another 4-year term or 5-year term or however long they have their board members on there. She was coughing so profusely in the last board meeting this week, that she ended up getting up and leaving the room. I mean, it was constant, and it was hard coughing. So I took it upon myself to email her, and I did so in an effort to help her. And I want to read the email to you, so again, you understand that I'm not a cold-hearted human being, but I actually, again, want to help this person, even though she's number one in my Deadpool of all the board members, again, who I've watched on video and, and expect to no longer be with us in the near future. She's one of these individuals. She is not in good health. She looks terrible. She looks gaunt and pale all of the time. And she actually made a statement during her coughing fit, where she said to everybody in attendance, and the room was packed again with LifeWise people, that she was going to leave because of her allergies, and she chalked it up to allergies. You don't cough like that with allergies, and she's been coughing like that since taking the shots, nonstop, year-round, in every board meeting. Not quite this bad, but she coughs profusely in board meetings. So I emailed her specifically. And here's what I said. And I've emailed her before, by the way, including the entire board about the COVID lie, books and documentaries that they need to read and watch and listen to. And I received no response back. Not a thank you, nothing. So, her life hangs in the balance here, and that's not my problem. But I'm trying to help this woman, and this will be the last email she ever gets from me. So I said the following, and the subject line was, "You're coughing." And here's what I said. I said, Mrs. Altman, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Sean Brooks. I live in Ohio. I've seen your school board meetings, and I can help you with your medical condition. I have a background in anatomy, physiology, health education, and constant education health research. I said, my PhD is in the field of education, if that matters to you. I said, first of all, since you took the COVID shots, quote unquote, your coughing has clearly become uncontrollable. I would venture to guess that you've never coughed like this before you took those shots. With that said, let me inform you of what you have actually done to yourself, and then I will provide you with some relief. Keep reading. I said, first, the COVID shots were not designed to cure, prevent anything because COVID doesn't exist. The shots were designed to kill the recipient. This is why everyone knows someone who is chronically ill, sick, or dead after taking them. I said, keep reading. I said, second, I would venture to guess that you have taken at least 3 or more of the COVID shots, and that you have probably taken more shots of other varieties. You need to stop taking all shots now. Never inject yourself with anything else ever again. The same goes for your loved ones, co-workers, and family members. Third, I would also venture to guess that you've gone to your doctor and they have prescribed you the following: liquid cough suppressants, antibiotics, steroids like prednisone, or even an inhaler, none of which have worked. Why is this the case? Because your doctors don't know what is wrong, nor what is causing it, nor the body system that has been affected. I said, fourth, the COVID shots have what is called nanotechnology within them. This is literal metal that is self-assembling. This has been proven. And I sent her Dr. Anna Maria Halcha's Substack page, where she lays it out article after article, year after year. And she's only one source talking to multiple other sources. I could have, again, provided Dr. Mackis's Substack also, but, that's up to her. I said, this is what is causing heart attacks, cancer, microfiber blood clotting, chronic fatigue, coughing illnesses that are endless, dementia, and much more. Your body is literally attacking itself to get rid of poisons that you have placed in it that it can't get rid of. This means that you are immune compromised. Some call this AIDS. In this case, it's vaccine-induced, quote-unquote. Therefore, the medical acronym is called VAIDS, Vaccine-Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. I said, fifth, why you're coughing? Question mark, basically. Your doctors think it's your lungs, but any pneumonia test or x-ray you've taken has come back negative for pneumonia. This is because you don't have pneumonia. The nanotechnology from the shots are in your brain and spinal cord. These COVID shots pass the blood-brain barrier and are causing your coughing because the central nervous system is responsible for respiration, as the central nervous system is responsible for all body functions and body systems. I said, sixth, your only chance to detox is to do the following among other options on my website below. Some may cost you, but I receive no money. I said, first, stop taking all shots. Second, never wear a mask again. Never deprive your body of oxygen. Third, purchase Nicorette nicotine chewing gum. I said, you get this at Walmart or Kroger. You can get it at Walmart or Kroger. Hell, you can get it anywhere. It says you want to get a 2 milligram piece or higher if you can tolerate it, like 4 milligrams. I said, and chew 1 piece for 30 minutes once a day. You need to do this for months in a row, every day. Nicotine is not addictive, nor is it a poison. It is a natural anti-inflammatory that has been proven to eliminate the nanotechnology in these shots and within your bloodstream, even past the blood-brain barrier, I said. The only side effect you will receive may be some slight dizziness or fatigue, but that will subside the next day. So chew a new piece the very next day and keep doing this, and keep this going for the next 6 months, if not longer. If you do not, your conditions will most assuredly get worse and may lead to blood clotting, cancer, or other endless illnesses. I said you need to read the medical documents and watch the documentaries that are available for free on my website in the downloadable PDFs here, and I sent her to the medical documents tab on my website, AmericanEducationFM.com. I also said I also recommend reading the book The 1 Minute Cure and purchasing it here and applying the hydrogen peroxide that comes with it, which again, it comes with a bottle of 12% food-grade hydrogen peroxide and a dropper for you to, again, drop it into a 6 to 8 ounce glass of water, a certain amount of drops, and then you work your way, again, over the course of a month, and you are adding oxygen to your bloodstream. This will cure almost anything, as it turns out, and the book is a fantastic read, by the way. I didn't write all of this, but the book is a fantastic read. I brought it up on the show, I think, back in 2021. I highly recommend everybody buying it. It really is amazing. It says the book will tell you how to use it appropriately. It, too, is not a poison. I said you don't have to trust me, but what you do have to do is start trusting yourself and stop listening to your doctors and trusting them. Everything you think you know about the medical industry and illness is a lie. I linked, again, the Amazon link where she can buy the book along with the dropper and the food-grade hydrogen peroxide, and said if you have any questions, let me know. Good luck, Sean. Again, she'll chalk me up to being some quack. And yet, she's the person who's injected who's sick, and I'm not. So, I'll leave her with these two things. First of all, Just the News just reported the other day that RFK, of course, is considering taking the COVID vaccines off of, like I said at the top of the episode, the recommended child vaccination list. This is a good move. It should be removed from all vaccination lists like all vaccines should. But then there was this, and this came out this month. This is from medRxiv, the preprint server for health sciences. And this is specifically from the Cold Spring Huber Laboratory. It was a peer-reviewed article put out by Yale, and it was titled the following: Effectiveness of the Influenza Vaccine During the 24-25 Respiratory Viral Season. This was posted on April 4th in preprint. I'm just going to read you the conclusion. It's brief, and it's to the point. It says, quote, "This study found that influenza vaccination of working-aged adults was associated with a higher risk of influenza during the 24-25 respiratory viral season, suggesting that the vaccine has not been effective in preventing influenza this season." Unquote. Translation: Influenza doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is injectable poison, and a fairy tale to accompany it to get people to inject themselves with the poison. That compromises their immune system in the short and long term, making them a lifelong patient, and then, of course, giving them a chronic illness, and then killing them. That's it. It's crystal clear now. Again, the only thing that stands in the way of someone knowing the truth about all of this is denial, cognitive dissonance, continued brainwashing, over-emotional responses, and an inability to take in facts when they're told to you, right to your face. Some would say that's the definition of insanity. I'll leave that up to other people. I tend to think it is, but whatever. That's up to everybody else. The facts are out there, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a matter of whether or not a person is willing to look and apply. I'm exhausted. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. Much more to come per usual, and I will catch you in the next one on Monday. Take care. God bless. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.